When it comes to any training outcome, you need to spend a significant amount of time in a particular phase to get the results you want. We know this. Now, this same rule applies when it comes to lifting heavy weights. Often, when we think about a peak or we think about, really pushing up our strength, it's normally like in a singular training block. Now, for me, that feels very short-sighted. So today, what I'm going to discuss and run through is how to approach lifting heavy weights and how to think about it, how to structure things, and how to adapt as things change for you, the lifter. Now, when we get stronger, it's given that you have a good technical base. You've done a ton of sets and reps. You know how to execute lifts well. You've likely built a substantial amount of muscle mass to assist, and you know what you're doing in the gym. So when it gets to a period where you're pushing up that intensity, you can live and simmer there for quite a period of time, providing that you don't overreach and you don't push too hard each session that's going to affect your recovery or put you at a risk of injury. But when we look at a typical training plan, or periodization is the word that we use, it's often done where it starts out with higher reps and it sort of tapers you down to a point where you get to your strongest lift at the end of that phase. Now, that might be, say, for instance, 6 months or 8 months. But when we're logically looking at it, if you say, hey, I've spent 3 to 4 months or 3 to 4 phases doing hypertrophy work, and now I've done 2 to 3 months doing strength work, and I've got 1 month to peak, I haven't really spent a lot of time in that phase getting used to the actual skill component of lifting. Now, I use the word skill because skill and lifting heavy weights are the same thing. Now, you obviously need a base. Your body needs to be able to support the weight that you're trying to lift, but maintaining your position, maintaining how you want to execute a squat, a bench, a deadlift under load is a skill, because once you get to a certain point in your lifting, you're going to get the weight is essentially going to try and throw you around. And your job as a lifter is less about a small cue, and it's more about how do I maintain global stiffness and rigidity to not get pushed around. So that kind of sounds a bit funny, but the reality is it's true, and 200 kilos on your back versus 250 versus 300 are all very different levels of intent that you need to have into maintaining your position. So if we go back to looking at that typical periodization model, and it might be you start off in a block of 12s and then 10s and then 8s and then 5s and then 4s and 3s and 2s, and you might spend one block doing single work. Now, anyone that's lifted heavy understands that lifting a heavy single is very, very different than lifting a heavy triple. You've got momentum, you've got a bit of inertia going on there, and you can kind of get into the groove of things on a triple. On one rep, you have to have all your ducks lined up. You need to be in the perfect position. You need to have your brace tight. You need to have your tension spot into the bar, for instance, really, really tight. Your connection point with the ground really switched on. So this is the component that is the skill component. And if you go and you look at a typical gym, the conversation I'll have a lot with people, especially in the treatment room, is I'm doing a strength block, and it's like, can you elaborate what a strength block is for me? And they'll be like, yeah, I'm doing 4 to 5 weeks of a strength block. Now, I'm going to be real with you. You cannot build a significant amount of strength in 4 to 5 weeks. So when we need to look at building the skill for something, we need to, 1, know that it's going to take a considerable amount of time, but 2, plan to stay in that period for a really long period of time. Now, when I have a look at it, so, a lot of the clients that I work with specifically are powerlifters, and we will use a 12-month timeline. And if we have a look at the timeline, you might come out of a comp prep where you've just done a national event or similar, and you've had a peak and, you're at your strongest. You might have a block or two where you do a little bit of training that's, a bit of variability training where it's kind of less intense, less volume, restore some normal movements, and get your motivation back for essentially getting into the gym and working hard again. But then if you break down the remainder of that year, you actually haven't got that much time. You might have 3 blocks where you're actually looking to push really hard into volume to build some muscle. And then you might have the same again for strength. And all of a sudden you're back at a peak. So there's different levels to this. So if we have a look at someone who's just starting training, you are not strong enough to induce so much fatigue that you need to overly consider the training variables of recovery and fatigue management. Yes, you shouldn't be training 7 days a week towards that goal. You need recovery days, but you have no understanding, or you don't actually know what your strength potential is yet. So fatigue management isn't as much of a consideration for someone that's starting out. So you could split your time up very easily between, 50% doing strength and 50% working towards more muscle building qualities, or blend those together. As you get a little bit more of an intermediate lifter and you've got a solid foundation of technique, you might then look and go, okay, well, where do I need to improve the most? Do I need to build some more muscle mass so that I can then lift heavier weights? Or have I got enough muscle mass? I'm happy with where things are at. You can always get better, but I'm happy where things are at. And now I actually need to execute the skill component more and get used to lifting heavy weights. So depending on where you are, you will need a slightly different approach. At the start, you just need to get a good base and get strong and get, really competent. But this doesn't happen over one block. In all honesty, to get really good at something, especially in this space, to build appreciable, amount of muscle mass, to build that strength, to just have this process so ingrained into you, it takes a long time. And that's not to say, oh my God, it's so far away. It does. It takes a long time. But the thing with this is you might work for a year and build up a really good base, but then you compare that year to the next year and you're like, wow, I evolved so much as a lifter in those 12 months. But that journey never actually, that you never finish that journey. It's a constant continuation of improvement, which is a really cool thing because there's always something to work on. But at the time you're doing very, very well. But then, you look back and you're like, what was I thinking back then? Like, that was terrible. But at the time from where you were, say 12 months prior to that was actually a huge improvement. So there's levels to this. Is the point that I'm trying to make here is, even if you spend 6 months training, you're still, if you spend another 6 weeks on top of that, you're going to be double as good as you were the 6 months prior, so this journey evolves. So when we look at training, we need to move away from this idea of a particular block. Like I'm doing a strength block, and you get these in like, CrossFit gyms and, semi-private training gyms and stuff like that. And they'll rinse through 1 or 2 blocks of semi-private work. And it's such a short-sighted approach to building strength. And the people that are actually doing it never get a true appreciation of what it is to actually be strong because they haven't spent enough time doing it. Now, this also isn't just like a, hey, go and max out every other day. That's not the conversation at all because, working between say 75% of your 1RM and 80% is very different than working between say 85% and 100%. So, you want to spend the time building that base below 90%, for instance. But then when you get above that, you also need to have a way that you can train that allows for recovery, that doesn't put you at risk of injury, but simmer that so you can continue to get better and better and better over time. Now, as someone that's starting out in the gym and say you wanted to become very strong and become a competitive powerlifter, it may take, honestly, 5 years 10 years to get to that point where you're an absolute master. And that is awesome because you cannot escape the sets and reps. But each year that you train, you're just learning. There's more skill, there's more understanding. there's more refinement to your technique. And obviously you're going to get all those body composition changes as well. So when you are in this journey, you need to make sure that you continue to strike. So where this has come from is having this very interesting conversation with a client of mine. She's probably listening. Hello. And we were discussing about what the plans are post nationals. And we have our national event in August this year. And the goal is to continue to build strength. We've been working together for, I would say, going on 4 years now. And lifting has dramatically changed, like really process driven, a ton of intent behind, execution, can really hold position well under like heavy loads. But we're at a point now where we're really happy with the amount of muscle mass that's there. We're really happy with how everything's going, but now we just need to simmer things and keep striking because all the base work's been done. So now we need to look at this in a bigger plan and go, okay, well, how do we continue? Because the conversation we had was post-comp, should we pull back and work on doing like building up muscle mass? Should we work on all these individual components? But that work in my mind has actually already been done. So if your true goal is to continue to build strength, you don't want to step too far away from it. Now, there is nuance around this as well. If someone has just been in a hole of like punishing the central nervous system over and over again for the better part of, say 2 or 3 years, taking a break away from like lifting heavy actually will be really nice and refreshing. It's great for your body. The list goes on. But if you've actually managed your training in a way where you feel good, you're still enjoying your training, you're still making really good progress, and you're motivated to keep moving forward, keep striking while the iron is, while things are still moving in that direction. Because taking your foot off the gas will often put you back a little bit. Because how's this for an example? Say I wanted to improve my bench press. And, I've gotten my numbers up, I'm really happy with my strength. If I then go, okay, I'm going to spend the next 3 to 6 months working on hypertrophy. I'm not going to use a barbell for any of my upper body days. And I'm purely just going to punish myself with dumbbells, cables, and every bit of machine. Sure, you may stack on 5 or 10 kilos of weight onto the upper body as a result, but you've then just lost 3 to 6 months of the skill aspect of lifting. So it doesn't mean necessarily that you've gotten weaker, but there's going to be a huge onboarding period back into full strength. So sometimes you need to weigh up whether that's actually worth it or not. Because if you, for instance, were going to only be competing for another 2 or 3 years in the sport of powerlifting, and then you're like, I'm going to change onto something else. It doesn't really make sense to take your eyes off what it is that you actually want to do. Yeah, sure. You may have a block here or there that may, take the stress off your body physically and mentally, but you're going to want to get straight back into that because you want to keep refining the skill component. Because at the top, and when you're striking and when you're really in the zone, it's actually the refinement of the top end that becomes really, really important because you've developed all the other qualities. So it's actually about how do you execute that incredibly well. So there's a very big difference in the training journey for a lot of people. And, this isn't just directed to people that are at the top. What I'm trying to say here is if you are on a journey, whatever journey it is, you need to spend appreciable amount of time in each one of those blocks working towards it. Now, you may spend more time towards one goal and you might have a couple of phases where it works towards something else. But if you want to be strong, you need to lift heavy weights. There's no way around it. I think, some exercises like squats, you may be able to do sets of 10 for, 4 weeks and then come back and, PB your 1RM after. But not all exercises, definitely not bench, but not all exercises work like that. So you want to, really build up the density in your nervous system, make sure that you're as efficient as you can and, working under these heavy loads, within limits will actually then allow you to, maintain the position as best as you can, not be pushed out of position, but it will make you even more technical. You'll know how to hold position. You'll know when your body's trying to push you out. You'll know, how to warm up properly, or when it is a good day, when to push, when to pull back. And it's very much a skill. It's not something that you just kind of wake up and you do. We often have people that come in through the gym and people just be following their normal training programs, and they'll come in and be like, wow, that person is so strong. But yeah, sure, they are very, very strong. But for them, it might be working at 70% for sets of 5. Like for them, it's actually not that strong. It's just another day putting savings in the bank account. They're coming in, they're doing the sets, they're doing the reps, because that is the foundation for it. You have to build the base. And if that person was to sit there and actually watch the set that was being done, say on bench press, they would realize that it wasn't particularly hard. It's stimulating, but not particularly hard. Now, that is a really big misconception in the industry. You see a lot of people that kind of do these strength blocks and they just jack the intensity up. Now, you do not get stronger just absolutely pushing and redlining your strength constantly. You get stronger by building a base, having the muscle, having the technique, and doing the boring work that no one wants to see. Doing the sets, doing the reps, and just doing density of work over and over and over again. But the other side to that as well is you do then need to also spend time doing the skill component, but that's not year round in most cases. So, when you see people, or you see your favorite lifter, or you see people absolutely crushing it at comps, and they do it in a methodical way, they're very process driven, just know that they've probably got, honestly, 5 to 10 years behind them of base building work. So if you are a person that wants to get stronger and you're doing maybe a block here and there of strength work, you've got to understand that there's a huge skill component to this, and there's also a huge time served component. So do the sets, do the reps, be in the suck for a little bit, because the motivating and the fun part is lifting heavy, but you've got to do the foundational work. And that's it from today's episode. I'll see you guys on the next one.